What's up, guys? Welcome back to the show. I am Jake Brosnan, your host. Today's guest was actually referred to me by Mark Denny. He sent me an email and said, you got to talk to this guy and pick his brain. So we've got Lloyd De Jongh on the show today. Now, I hope I'm saying his last name correctly. That's how you'd pronounce, it'd be Jung, right? Jonghh. De Jongh, that's what I would think. All right, he'll have to correct me as soon as we get him on here. But get your questions, your comments ready, and you guys know the drill. I hope you thoroughly enjoy the show. All right, so we have Lloyd De Jongh on the show. I did mispronounce it. It's a soft J. We had a good chat before we went live here. I hope I didn't. I'm going to have to ask him to repeat some of that stuff because he's just too interesting. How you doing, Lloyd?
Hi, Jared. I'm very well, thank you.
Good. Jared's the guy we were talking about. I'm Jake. See, we're doing it. It's back and forth.
Of course, my bad.
No, it's okay. See, tit for tat. It's only fair. What you're doing is so interesting. Your background, which I'll ask you about, but in the work you've been doing with Mark Denny, and you guys did a collaboration on a knife too, I believe. Was it the Akita?
We haven't done. This is actually the knife here. This he actually did with Kevin Carr.
There we go.
But we are working on a system to deploy this.
That's
what
it was.
Methodology that combines his skills and my skills together to utilize this weapon.
Very nice. Well, and so we were talking about this before. So Lloyd is joining us all the way from Poland right now. You're originally from South Africa, is that correct?
Correct.
So give everybody a little bit of your background because this will be new to me too. So how did you first did you start as a martial artist as a young person or get into this world, and how did you get into this world?
I grew up in South Africa, which I think people understand the political instability, the violence that has characterized a lot of South Africa's history. I've been mugged numerous times. We have a pretty violent gang subculture. I was 16 when I started doing karate. I think most of us started out in karate. And what happened was I was with my girlfriend and I was about 21 years old. I was on the train and two guys, I could have dropped them both if I'd known what was happening, if I'd been able to read the situation, but they got the drop on me. The two of us were very lucky to make it out alive. We were very traumatized. And I told myself, I have to figure out what these guys are doing because these people are unkempt, dirty, missing teeth. And we dismissed them. And I realized that these guys have a method. They're doing something that we don't respect, we don't recognize because it doesn't conform to our perception of what a martial art is. But South Africa has the highest knife killing rate in the world. If you look at the Philippines has twice South Africa's population. We've got 8 times their murder rate. We've got 10 times their violent crime rate. So and I started studying the gangs. I started speaking to criminals. It's a slow process. It took more than a decade of collecting information together, working with gangsters, criminals, ex-cons.
And is this where the Piper system came from then? Was this research that you conducted?
Yes. This is a distillation of the methodologies. The system, shall we say, was put together based on the research of what the gangs and the criminals do, both in prisons as well as on the streets.
So for people watching, anybody that's a Kali practitioner or trains in a weapons system, this is going to be hugely helpful because we hear all the time about the prison sewing machine. This guy has done, I think, more research than anybody I've ever heard of on that style of attack and that style of fighting. What do you think is the biggest discrepancy between the way, it can be any style of martial arts, but Filipino martial arts in particular is trained as opposed to what you're seeing in the real world that's being utilized as attacks? Are you seeing discrepancies there?
Certainly there are. I would say you're looking at a culture, well, two things. One, martial arts is, you're looking at some very, very capable, very intelligent people taking ideas and refining them. So you're coming up with some very good things. These ideas may or may not have been, let's say, pressure tested, right? But you're looking at it, now we have a culture, a violent culture that is uneducated, but highly experienced. They've got the body count to back up their claims. So they have an effective system, and the movements, though, are larger, cruder, often larger, cruder. They use very simple techniques, very little flash. There is, and also there's a sneakiness to it. And not only that, it's not just about the actual technique of the attack. You've got to look at the setup, how they approach, how they manage to close that distance, what they say, what they do to get in. Because we're looking at more of an assault or an ambush than a duel. The Filipino side of things, in my experience, tends to be more of a dueling approach. Wider stances, assuming a larger blade, a heavier blade. But when you're dealing with a blunt knife like this okapi that can barely cut paper, and it's small and it's short, you need to get in close. So the movements are much tighter once the action happens.
So you mentioned before we went on that you had some blades there that are commonly used in the regions that you're talking about. So you just mentioned that one is blunt, could barely cut paper. So this is not a slashing heavy tactic that these people are employing. It's a thrust heavy one.
Correct. This blade, this okapi, now this one has been sharpened. This one we actually got from the police back in the day. This was taken off some gang members. So if I start doing this, you notice it's not cutting me. I mean, this is a cheap $2 blade. It will break. And in fact, when it's used, what happens is they might intend for it to break. They might hit you behind the clavicle, jam it in, and then snap the handle off, right? Then they'll walk away, they urinate on their hands to kill all the DNA evidence, and they throw the handle away. And you've got to, so it's a cheap blade, it's a very light blade, and it is this last inch here, well, this is it's a stabbing system. It's not very much of a cutting system. The knife's too light and too likely to break.
So what are you seeing as far as tactic-wise? Because this is something that I've read a lot of books on, and I've spoke with military personnel and law enforcement. But those we've talked about pre-fight indicators and spatial awareness and the study of proxemics and heuristics to kind of map your surroundings. And I think in the context of self-protection, people need to expand out past once the attack happens. Once the attack happens, you failed a lot of pre-fight indicators and barriers that hopefully you should have been able to deal with it before then. But what are some of these tactics you were talking about that they use to close distance and people to get on top of you?
Two things. It depends on what you're dealing with, right? But he has to, obviously, there's the different stages. He has to have the motivation, which changes his psychology. He then has to select the victim. He then has to approach the victim. That assault is only the fourth phase in that process, right? So he then has to. So when he positions himself, now I'm coming from my culture, or South African culture, which is different to Western culture. You'll have someone who will come up to you, mumbling and stumbling, talking very quietly, very strange posture, because we are, from a Western point of view, we like to have a nice solid base. We like to be based out so we can throw our punches and our kicks. In Africa, people stand differently. If you look at the way, when you watch black guys walk, when they asymmetrical, one side's hanging and they walk with a limp.
Okay.
Right. This is very common back home. Now you've got someone who walks in a different way, so the mechanics of the movement are different because he doesn't have a solid base. He cannot necessarily punch in a straight line, so the moves might have to come vertically or at some odd angle that would seem completely impractical from a Western point of view. So he then would say, look, obviously the things about looking for the time or just mumbling, and you go, sorry, I can't hear you. Can you come a little closer? Also, he's not going to necessarily be face to face. He might come to you at 90 degrees. So he will be at 90 degrees to you and launch the attack, while technically his line of force is running away from you, across you. But that 90-degree angle is what he wants because you're not trained to A, recognize it, or B, deal with it.
So in your research to this, into creating the system, you said you spoke with gang members, with criminals. What was that process like? I mean, were these guys welcome to, how they were just, did you go up and go, hey, will you guys tell me how you stab people? And they shared information? How did that go?
That's a great way to get yourself stabbed. No, first of all, you grow up in the culture. So one, it is a form of play within the youth. So you learn some of it just growing up. Some of the movements are just the norm as you grow up. Two, you see them being used. So every now and again, you're going to see some kind of violence, and you learn that way, which is why, as I mentioned, people with experience, but not an education. because educated people compose their features and their movements. Less educated people have much bigger movements, much more aggressive, much more emotional. We're taught from a Western point of view, keep your emotions under control. But these guys let the emotion out, right? There's a lot of, and that changes the structure and the movement. We had to, through family members, through contacts, ask, may we speak to so-and-so? Then you get permission. Or we go to a prison and you go and do like an outreach day to prisoners, for argument's sake. You know, play games or whatever the case is, play football, play chess, go talk to them. And in the process, over some time, you build up some trust and you ask, look, what about this? My mother introduced me to someone who is dead now. He was assassinated, who taught me what he had learned in prison and what he had learned on the streets and what he had personally done. So it's a long, slow process, and you've got to be introduced. And also when you ask, and you say, what do you do? Oh, you know, he'll go, well, you know, we just grab him, we stab him like that. And that's your lesson. And it might take you months to work that, to backwards engineer that, because he doesn't know exactly. He's just saying, well, you know, you do this and do that. But it takes you several months possibly to refine that and get to the essence of what he was trying to demonstrate or discuss.
So when these guys have actually tried and tested this stuff. When you work with people now that want to train in the Piper system, how do you convey the realities of this to people that might be a bit naive? Do you see a lot of naivete when it comes to this type of thing in new people?
There is a degree of that. Remember, the weapon is short range, and the way it's deployed is ice pick, which itself shortens the range, right? So this guy's got to get pretty close. And I'll start with a simulation of the whole process. Before we get into the technicalities, I'll say, look, I'm going to simulate being the bad guy. And that's when I go into that mode. I become that gangster. I go on the assault. I'm the predator now, and I'm coming up. Or I'm the helpless beggar, or I'm just the guy who's starving and hungry. And I go into that mode. I can role play that very well. And it is so unnerving or disarming. And you'll find that people tend to freeze, people tend to get confused, and that's really what you take advantage of.
So from the time you started doing this to the time you structured something that you wanted to take out and share with other people, how long of a process was this?
15 to 18 years, I would say.
Before it was into something that you wanted to share?
Yes, about 15 years, yeah. Yeah.
So,
think about that long.
So are you, how is this being received? I mean, are you doing a lot of traveling? Who are you primarily teaching? Is it law enforcement? Is it civilians?
I've taught more incidentally to law enforcement people. I've had a few students. I still chat to a few. I have people on Skype, Facebook, and so on. However, most of it I've only really taught because I was based in the Middle East, and because of I teach effectively. I teach two different skills. One is on the offensive side, murder from a gang point. It's robbery, thuggery, and murder. So I'm very, very careful whom I teach. I vet who comes into my classes because I only teach at seminars right now. And two, I teach, shall we say, prison-style assassination, very close-range assassination-type techniques derived from prisons. So I'm very, very careful whom I teach. I want to let people know, look, this stuff it has been used. It is not an ancient martial art from 1,000 years ago. It's killing people today, right? And so I want to be sure I'm teaching it to people who are not going to want to use it in their gang or teach it to gangsters. Sorry, did I lose my...
No, not at all.
Yeah, so I teach only at seminars. I said I take great care as to who I have in the seminars. And sorry, let me end there before I lose my thread.
No, it's okay. I see some stuff popping up. Do we have questions?
We have a question from Paulo.
All right, throw it up.
If there is such a significant difference between South African culture and Western culture as far as the escalation or progression of violence, how relevant or practical is it to learn your system if I live in the West?
This gives you a lot of tactical options that simply do not exist in Western systems. A lot of defensive as well as offensive moves, a lot of psychological tools, ways of unbalancing people, surprising the heck out of them, just making them freeze or just making them confused that simply do not exist. Also, the ability, for instance, can I stand up and do something?
Absolutely.
Can they see me?
Yeah.
I can barely see myself from a tiny little circle. For instance, from a Western point of view, we are taught to stand, based out, But what if you're like this? My knees are, I don't know how well you can see me, but my knees are together here. I can fight from here. Or what if I was literally in this posture? I can fight from there. Understand? Now, I don't expect you to adopt that kind of extreme sort of positioning and, however, what if you are back-footed and you find yourself in that extreme position? Your spine is bent, you're in some weird-ass posture where typically you'd be falling on your face. I can show you how, A, to maintain balance, and regain initiative and actually fight both offensively and defensively from there.
So, and that's the thing too, is we do get, no matter, we're in this melting pot now where people are sharing more than ever. And so you're seeing, I think, just in the general populace being exposed to things like MMA, have an understanding of basic movement in a way I don't think people had before it became so popularized and viewed. Like you'll see people, in street fights or barroom brawls, it's changed a little bit. You'll still get the wild punchers, but I'm seeing a lot more people that are watching a lot of UFC, and just through osmosis, they keep it in a little bit tighter and try doing more straight punches where I didn't see that, before. And so, finding yourself in uncomfortable positions, I think I had Raza Angola Tafari on, actually. We were talking about cultural differences in the way people engage in violence. And not racially specific, I'm talking regionally specific. People that live in an inner city as opposed to the suburbs or in a farming community, everybody has their way of engaging. And from his observation, there's such a massive difference. So from one state to the next, or one area to the next, you're going to be encountering ever-changing environments. It seems like your system fits into that pocket.
Well, there's different mechanics in the West versus Africa. Right? We have a different way of moving. Also, what you'll notice is that when I spoke of the prison aspect of it, which is more the assassination, these people have also developed methods of surviving that assassination. Because remember, the assault is an ambush. Where possible, it is an ambush. And also, they deal with gangs, you're going to deal with multiple attackers. So they've developed methodologies for dealing with that, and there are successes. So we can take these ideas and we can then refine them and use them. And this is something that, especially the multiple attackers training, this is something that people seem to really enjoy because I give them tools they hadn't thought of, hadn't seen before. But also, when you're in these weird-ass positions, from a point of view of my culture, they can operate, they can do things, strike at angles and work where this, normally if you were in some weird position, you would have to disengage, open up, get some distance, find your base, now you're ready. Whereas, as I showed, I can work from that position without having to change posture, without having to base out, without having to push away to get space. I can work from there both offensively and defensively.
Wow.
Because those postures are the actual offensive structure. So what you would call a vulnerable structure where you think, now I've got the guy, he's actually in position and waiting for you to hit him.
Wow. Do we have some more? I see more stuff popping up. What do we have?
Yeah, there's another one from Paulo.
Okay.
If criminals,
Hi, Paulo.
if criminals are finding efficacy in untrained movements when it comes to attack, what is the purpose of reverse engineering that? Would the actual lesson here be that no training is needed to execute fatal attacks? And if the nature of these attacks are deceptive/ambush, then there can exist no real defense to such attacks.
Well, if anything, Napoleon very wisely said that never fight the same enemy too often or he will learn how to deal with you, to paraphrase. So when you encounter the same kind of structure, now it's not that this is necessarily better than what's in the West or in Japan, it's different. But because you have no idea what it is, therefore I can get through because it's simply just foreign to you. You're looking for something that's never going to arrive, right? And so it's not necessarily a replacement. It might be something that you add as a way. You've been ambushed. How do you recover from that ambush? These guys have experience in that realm. I've been studying that and refining that. So they've got ways of launching attacks from angles where normally you'd be falling on your ass. They have ways of recovering from those stumbles and bumps and things. They've got ways of moving off of walls. Of when you get shoved into a wall hard, they've got ways of coming off that wall. When normally you'd end up with concussion, they've got ways of coming right back at you as if you just bounced a tennis ball off that wall. Right, so there are certain ideas there. Now, these are criminals generally, so they are looking to ambush people. We have to accept that that is the context. However, the ideas, obviously there's overlap. We can find where these things merge with other things, where they complement them, but many times also they totally contradict them. Like they'll tell you that what a true, like for instance, you've always got, parries. Like for instance, in Africa, there are no parries. I've never seen one, never heard of one. Like you don't get parries because the kind of attack you get does not lend itself to being parried.
Huh.
And it's from a criminal point of view, the attacks are designed not to be intercepted. They make it incredibly hard. They are specifically designed to be difficult, which gives you a very good enemy to study, like a red team that you go up against to learn test your defenses against.
So you mentioned before people developing tactics for surviving this multiple attacker assassination type of thing. So what's the systemic approach that a person so if I get attacked by somebody in an unconventional way, what are the steps you would take them through, starting from observation to now this weird thing has been sprung on me? I mean, you're probably not telling people they're going to survive unscathed being jumped by multiple people that have the intent to kill you. So, I mean, how do you survive something like that?
Well, look, we study successful survivors, right? So as much as we can, we ask people who witness these things or experience these things directly, and we try to extract as much as we can, and we try to simulate. Right now, no simulation is 100% real, but we can certainly get some good ideas, and then we can get in there and you can practice. First, I would think is to recognize so that you're not taken totally by surprise. The less surprised you are, the more you can prepare. Right. Also, it saps his will to attack you because he might be threatened by you. The reason he's coming in sneakily is that you might be a threat to him too. Right. So he wants to have a 100% clear field before he launches his attack. The less certain he is, the less committed he is, the more likely he is to break off. So better for you. Right. Also, you teach people that you don't know. You have to be very comfortable with uncertainty. You have to physically, emotionally, intellectually embrace that uncertainty. You have to understand. Can you give me 1 minute to try to explain an idea?
Please do, yeah.
You're driving along, right? I haven't thought about this in a while, so forgive me if I'll try not to ramble. You're driving along, something happens, oh my gosh, and you grab the steering wheel, and and you survive that situation, you get past it, and you don't know how, right? You barely survived it, you made all the right moves in the moment, right? And there's this blankness, you can't quite remember, or someone attacks you, you do something, and this guy's on the ground, and you don't know how he got there, you don't know what you did, right? Now, if you look at it from an African point of view, this is kind of how they are taught to think about combat. From a Western point of view, we start with all the intellectual basics, and we build this ideal structure, and then we say, well, now when the real thing happens, it's going to be nothing like what you did in sparring or in kata, but you'll figure it out.
Right.
From an African point of view, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right? From an African point of view, they say, look, stuff's going to happen in the moment, and you will respond in the moment emotionally as follows, and the techniques will create themselves in response to what's coming in. They start from the other end, and they work their way towards techniques. And you'll find that a typical gangster only has 3 or 4 techniques, maybe 5, maybe 3 or 4 is typical. So a gang of 10 guys has 40 techniques, but it's not like they have a system. Each guy has 3 or 4 of his own techniques to suit his temperament, his build, his preferences. So what happens is when you have an incoming stimulus, right, when the movement is beyond a certain, your neocortex, your forebrain, is able to cope with incoming stimuli up to about roughly 1/4, 1/5 of a second. That's your hand-eye coordination limit. Fighter pilots have up to 1/8 of a second, right? But below that, your forebrain can no longer cope. It sends that signal, then gets handled by your cerebellum, which is able to spot and deal with stimuli up to 13 thousandths of a second. It is able to see and then predict and then respond. Now, the more experience that you have, as you gain experience, you build what's called a database of associative coherence. And this is how your brain deals with uncertainty. Now, as we provide you with training, that database of associative coherence slowly, over time, it builds up experience. It's able to make connections in parallel, right? right? Now, if you consider that when that thing happens, you go blank. You can't remember quite what happened, and afterwards you've got a fragmentary recollection, a word here, a bit of feeling, a image, because this part of your brain, your forebrain, is unable to cope. Remember, this one is moving at thousands of times faster than this one, right? So all that this gets, so this guy takes over, he goes into your database of associative coherence, comes up with a solution, not the best solution, the first workable solution, which will give you something to work from, right? Then it hands over to the forebrain, says, how are we doing? Take a snapshot. Then there's that snapshot, it hands back. How are we doing? Snapshot, hands back. Action, snapshot, action, snapshot. That's why you only have these fractions of insight. So the point is, I teach people how to engage that part of the brain consciously. And once you can consciously engage it by me attacking you at random, giving you random attacks, putting you into that situation where you have no idea what's coming, but I'm going to attack you nasty and hard and fast, and I mean I'm coming in hard and fast, you will cope. You will deal with it, and you will gain that confidence, because you realize if you are able to consciously access that function in your brain, you can actually deal with these things. Prior to that, though, I teach people how to balance, how to work off balance, how to deal with being unstructured and off balance. So first, they cope with that, because your skin is your fastest organ. Your skin's way faster than your eyes. Your skin is your organ of balance, not your ears. Your ears are the organ of balance for your head. So what we want to say is, if you feel the pressure on your feet shifting, you know something's happening. This is wrong. It's coming in too fast. I've got contact on the skin. This guy fires up. Wham! He goes into action, does something appropriate, gets data, goes back in. That database starts working over time, and eventually you work your way as a series of steps to a solution. I'll stop there.
Awesome. No, that's so interesting. This is exactly the type of thing that I find so intriguing and interesting now, because it's all, I mean, so much of my training, it's been the, like you said, that where you're starting with techniques, and then you try to get through this process into where the form falls away and you're able to improvise in that moment.
Yep.
But the way that you just broke it down, I hope people that are watching are finding that as interesting as I am. So let's do this. Let's queue up where it's about time to do our first little break here. We'll queue up some more questions, and when we come back, we'll get to it. This is, I don't know, just throw them in, because this is a super interesting conversation to me. So everybody stay tuned.
I drop it straight down. I bring it right down, right on top of the thumbnail. And scoop in. Time, bang.
I'll wait, and I'll just...
Here, pop.
So what happens, if you watch our sparring video, we kind of get into these double wrap-up positions, or the other guy wraps up. So how can you get free? So if he wraps up on me, one that I really liked, I picked it up out of the HEMA manual, is I can drive my hand in here. I'm gonna let go of this hand, reach around, grab this one, and then drive. Okay, so you can, just so you can see from this side, we wrap up, we're controlling, I switch, and then I drive, and I come out this way. Obviously a wall or whatever, if we're thinking bladed weapon, this is my outside blade going against the neck. Sweet little reversal on that one. I mean, he can hit me, but I'm gonna be driving forward like this, and I've got all the advantage in the world on that one.
And we're back. All right. So I was just telling you, this to me is, I've heard what you were talking about referred to in broad strokes, but you went a level underneath it, and to a level of specificity that it answered a lot of ambiguous, like, kind of questions that I wasn't even able to fully articulate in my big dumb brain. But let's real quick throw up what the next question we got.
All right, this one's from Clive Turner.
Mr. Clive.
Thank you for sharing and inspiring us. I spent 6 months in Durban in SA and had the pleasure to see some dancers at Osaka. Remind me a lot of capoeira. Do you see much hiding of the arts where you are?
Hiding of the arts. Well, I no longer live in South Africa. I'm based in Warsaw in Poland now, where I've moved to recently. there is a resurgence in interest at the moment. I started researching the Nguni stick fighting, the Nduka, those skills. Actually, people call it Zulu stick. It's Nguni, which is the tribal. It's tribal. It's actually that whole. Is it a tribe? Yeah. Anyway, they have two arts. One is the stick with the blocking stick, so it's the two-stick system, and the other is Shaka developed the short stabbing spear with the shield. Those weren't, I think, taught to outsiders until relatively recently, 20 or 30 years ago, but it's never had much interest. However, in terms of what we do, or what I do, it became very relevant to look deeper into that. It's more, these days it's taught culturally, and I would say that cultural art is not necessarily the actual fighting art. So it's very hard to get that. You have to find someone really much older, 60, 70 years old, to get the legitimate black fighting art, that stick fighting and spear fighting. Those are the guys that really grew up with that stuff for real. There is a resurgence of interest, but in terms of the knife system that I work with, historically the Dutch brought the Indonesians, who brought their version of silat to the shores. That was in the 1650s. So that eventually, so the Indonesians brought the knife. Our black culture never had a knife. So in the prisons, about 120, 130 years ago, they fought each other. They merged. They formed gangs. They worked together. So now you have the fishermen, the guys who used the knives, and they brought their silat. And together with a little bit of boxing, some British boxing, which added some of the footwork and some of the evasions and the movements and so on, those three blended together, and now you have what I teach.
Wow. So what first sparked your desire to do this? You said you started in karate. So how do you go from karate into this?
I got mugged.
There you go. That'll do it.
Yeah, I got mugged. I after that incident with my girlfriend on the train when I was like 20 years old, 21 years old, I was like, never again. I'm going to study what these people do. I'm going to learn what they do, and I'm going to make sure that never happens to me again. And it turned into a very more than a decade-long pursuit, and it became something that people seem to be very interested in.
What was the first thing you sought out once you had that epiphany and you realized never again? What was the first thing that you went to after that?
I spoke to my mom, who knew this gangster guy that I mentioned, the one that was killed. She introduced me to him. And I've had other contacts along the way. We've combined forces. We've shared things. My specialty, I guess, is more within the ambush sphere. My specialty, I would say, is working on receiving the ambush and overcoming the ambush. But to do that, to survive and overcome a deadly ambush, you first have to learn how to ambush. So rather than, shall we say, the gang fighting application, I'm more into the guy mugging you, coming up and approaching, and then doing the assault and countering. So yeah, I think the first thing I learned was just to observe the movement, the way people move, and I realized black people walk differently. The balance on the feet is different. And so I can explain it very simply. Yeah.
Well, so okay, so when you work with people from the West, because I've heard of the prison sewing machine, this kind of forward hammer grip position, repeatedly thrusting and pumping here, and you're saying more of a position from the ice pick grip coming down. Do you take into consideration these cultural differences if you do teach people from more European style countries? How do you approach that?
That's taken me, I would say, since 2013. It's taken me 5 years to refine the teaching methodology to the point where it makes sense to Westerners, people from Europe, people from America that I teach. Originally, it was very raw, very African, and I realized that people simply couldn't relate to it, couldn't move that way. It's taken me 5 years to fix that. I believe I have it down now to the point where it's usable and easily understandable and blended very well with people who commonly, silat is the most common, the FMA is the most commonly used knife art. So the silat / FMA sort of type of movement, I think I've blended it, and I've had, I work very closely with Mark Denny of the Dog Brothers, and he and I have been working together for some time now. So we've tested it extensively, and people are able to learn it and apply it, and it's just adding skills they didn't have before, giving them options that they did not possess prior.
So where do you want to see the Piper system go? What do you want this to grow into? What's coming over the horizon? Do you have events, collaborations, things coming up? Where's this going?
I'm seeing. Well, okay. There's a handful of things. One is that we're seeing a rise in knife crimes in certain parts of the world. Right. If you look at places like the UK, there's a large rise in knife crimes. If you look at Europe, you're having also migrants are bringing their own particular. If you look at YouTube, you find in, for instance, police officers that are using tactics designed for their culture, and they're trying to apply them on people from different cultures, and it's just not working very well. So if they can understand, look, this is how your perp moves, understand how he moves and how it's different, then that allows you to modify or alter or introduce new tactics. Also, from an offensive point of view, I've also been working extensively with some others. Most people just stab with the knife. It's just a killing tool. I can use this as a weapon of distraction. So that, I'll give you an example. Let's see. This, you talked about the stab, right? Here's the stab coming. Oh my gosh, going to my face. But the way that in Africa the weapon is used, there's a heck of a lot of mobility in the wrist. There's a lot of flexibility and mobility in the wrist. So if I were to use my weapon and stab towards your face for argument's sake, right, as the weapon travels towards your face, I can make it disappear and draw your attention away while I give you a lovely right hook behind your jaw. So those are the kinds of things. For instance, one more example, if I may. I'm attacking here, 90 degrees angle. So here's the guy, here's me at 90 degrees. I'm attacking to the center of his belly. But actually the target is his rear kidney. Because what happens is, as I'm doing this, I roll my wrist over, and that action automatically shortens the distance between me. It reduces the length of my arm. I then can roll my wrist down, which further reduces the distance. Then I do this. So as I'm doing this, the major action is me shifting to his rear, right? Now I have a choice: grab his head, yank, pull him down to the ground, or take the weapon into his kidney, into his gluteus, into his, you name it, anywhere at the rear, all the way down to his ankle.
Now, does this fall under the CLOT use of it, or this is what criminals in the assassination and prison style systems are using?
It's a little bit hard to differentiate between the two without me showing you.
Yeah, of course.
There's a CLOT element in there, certainly, but it's not CLOT, because remember, that has been blended for more than a century. You're talking some people who don't actually know CLOT. They've seen it, they're uneducated, they've taken these ideas and they've kind of used them. But if you look at it historically, if you start to look at some CLOT movements, you can say, hold on, that looks familiar. So it's not quite CLOT, but the ideas are there. A lot of the movements, if someone's an expert at CLOT and I am not, they will start to recognize. And it allows for, it's a weird merging of three systems: boxing, as I said, Western boxing, and it allows for a weird merger of stuff so that both hands are being used simultaneously. The weapon could be used non-violently. I can look like I'm stabbing you 5 times and not touch you once, but meanwhile I've kneed you, I've headbutted you, I've shoulder bumped you, I've given you a left hook, a right cross, and so that's how that could also be deployed.
So this is something. I mean, being in Europe, I don't like to get like political on the show, but to me, this is just a common sense thing that you had mentioned, that there's a lot of political instability. And there's this attitude, especially in America right now, that if we just get rid of all the guns, then everybody's going to start picking daisies and prancing about and everything will be phenomenal. When
we've had no violence prior to the gun being invented.
Exactly. And to see, even in the parts of the world that you're talking about where firearms are not readily accessible, the sophistication of going back to primal tools, pointy things. I mean, it's the bad people don't go away. Their tactics just adapt.
Right.
But so being in Europe, and you'd mentioned that the knife crimes are on the rise. It seems like especially in Britain, that they're almost outlawing self-defense. So are there areas of Europe that, even if you're talking about surviving edged weapons or carrying tools with you, is it becoming increasingly difficult in areas of Europe to even do anything aside from die?
That's a frustrating issue to discuss. I've spoken with people who who, when one talks about self-defense and being threatened or worried about your loved ones being attacked, or talking about defending yourself, they've literally told me things like, "What about his rights?" I'm like, "He's trying to kill your wife. You know, who cares about his rights?" But yeah, there is that. But in the UK, well, okay, there's not much I can do in terms of changing policy. But I think if we can teach people how criminals operate, give them an accurate model of how criminals select them, approach them, operate as ones and twos and threes, right? Also, give them a working model that I know from experience works on multiple attackers, gives people some chance of surviving and escaping and doing some serious damage along the way. That could be useful to them. I think being able to also tap into, remember I told you that the ability to tap into your cerebellum, be able to operate almost unconsciously, instinctively, that gives you tools you didn't have before, so you can shorten the training requirement. I think that's towards solving a problem that people have been working on for decades. I think also that giving them tools that have been used by people to survive assassination attempts by hardened killers, I don't want to give people false hope, but these are tools that I know have been used, so there's a possibility. No, as we said earlier, you said, no guarantee of getting away unscathed, but you can surprise the heck out of a guy. Think about this. If someone comes in and he thinks he's got the drop on you, and you suddenly start to do something that he is not prepared for, he goes into confusion instead of you going into confusion. Remember, when you're taken out blindsided, you go, your brain farts, right? What if he gets the brain fart?
So change the timing.
So yeah, he's vulnerable to you then. And so if we can do that, we are providing tools at least that, and also, here's the thing, this stuff doesn't look like this. It looks like that. It looks like, that's how it looks. And you're slapping the crap out of a guy, and it looks like it's all by accident.
So let me ask you this, because I know we have a lot of people from the U.S. on the show, but we have had people from the U.K. on the show. The considerations are so different as far as legality and what level of force you're allowed to go to, what type of self-defense tools you're allowed to carry and implement. What type of considerations for people that are watching in Europe right now? I mean, are there things that they can safely carry on without being charged with a crime, defensive tools, or do you not even mess with tools because you're being surprised? Is it tactics exclusively?
I've had friends in the UK who were caught with tasers in their checked-in luggage coming through the airport and arrested and taken to court and fined and, faced with jail time. So yeah, what I teach really is a form of, you need to maybe be able to make the observations to feed your database so that it can then produce the correct responses, right? So one is you're teaching people much greater awareness, specificity of awareness. And two, the use of, if you're going to a prison, they make improvised weapons. You notice they don't take AK-47s into most prisons. They don't let the prisoners carry those.
They're hard to sneak in through the cake.
Yeah. Well, like, here's your Spyderco, here's your, take this. No. So you should be able to operate with a pencil, because what we find is the weapon is almost secondary. It's the ability to move well, to move in such a way that you minimize the harm to yourself, maximize your positioning so that you can fire back, right? And I don't mean like fire the gun. I mean just hit back so that you can nullify what he's doing as fast as possible using your crazy mechanics. Blending it with what you already know of your mechanics. But so when your perfect structure is broken, you don't have to reset. You work from that broken structure, because in my culture that's normal structure. So it's not foreign. So you're shortening the response, the counter-attack time. That cycle is shortened. So you're giving them a little bit of extra tools, and they can work with any kind of blunt instrument, a piece of wood, a toothbrush, a pencil. You should be able to work with a fork, a spoon. Those things should then, because you've got the movement down, and the more advanced the weapon in your hand, the more effective you become. But the ultimate fact is your ability to perceive, respond, and move.
All the John Wick nerds out there just started drooling as soon as you said you should be able to kill a guy with a pencil. I just saw it happening. Finally! God forbid anybody kills his dog. All right, so we're going to queue up that second break here real quick. Just if you got questions, we got limited time with them here. The video will be up to watch afterwards, but if you want to ask questions live, drop them in and we'll get to them. So everybody stay tuned and we will be right back.
for cardio and for that quick twitch muscles, I work, it's called a jab pyramid. So we go slow. I go 1, I step out, 1, I go to 2, 1, 2, I go 2, 1, 2, I go 3, all the way up to 10. Then, when you feel comfortable, then you go, ready?
Oh my God. That is insanity. Oh, that's awesome. Oh, thank you for sharing that. Okay, that's a great training drill from Eglon Rich here. Thank you so much. Talking about you've been trying to schedule some stuff with Mark Denny. I mean, where can I put some information up on your lower third on how to find you on social media, but is there a particular website or a place people can go to look you up and see seminars, or I mean, how do people find you?
Well, I'm based in Warsaw in Poland. However, I have 2 different Facebook pages. The one is, if you search on Facebook for Piper System, you'll find me, or just use my name, Lloyd De Jongh. Then I also have another page called Tripwire System. The Tripwire System. So the one I would say I separate them into offense and defense. The one is the actual, shall we say, the knife method. But then I also at some point take the knife out of the hand and we say, now we're going to do movement. You should be able to do this effectively without the weapon. Once the weapon goes in your hand, then you should be far more effective. And the tripwire is really the method of observation, the way of working inside of uncertainty, being able to extrapolate based on very short time slices, very minimal amounts of data. Your brain is able to do that when given the guidance on how. And it's not actually very difficult. It's actually really easy. I can teach it. What I spoke of, how to actively get people to respond in the moment to an ambush and surprise, takes me about 3 minutes, maybe less.
What? How is that possible? Okay, I can't have you give away your secret, but I mean, that's...
I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. That's why Mark talks to me.
Wow, that's incredible. Like, I mean, if you got it to the point where you can articulate what you're trying to articulate, adults operate off of the why. So if you're able to describe and convey that information to them in such a short amount of time, it's such a valuable tool.
Well, let me give you a clue then. So think about it. We learn things from a Western point of view. Now, I come from 2 different worlds. One is Africa, the other is European. I was educated at a European school, but I was born and raised and grew up in Africa. Half my mom's side of the family is German. So I'm a little bit, OCD when it comes to, I'm a little bit German about something. So when we learn things intellectually, we learn and work in serial, because your forebrain is serial. It works one thing after the other. The back of your brain operates in parallel. Now, if you want to engage the back of your brain doesn't speak English. It holds no language, right? It doesn't do maths. It doesn't do logic. It makes connections. All it does is it makes connections. And the better of a database you have, the better connections. It makes the more experience you have, the faster and the better it works. So also the more it can isolate the signals coming in and extrapolate from those to come up with counters, right? And then work out the probabilities of dealing with that. Now, when you talk to your forebrain, we use language, we use tone, right? We use logic, we use numbers, we use reason. The back of your brain doesn't do any of that stuff. When you talk to a puppy, how do you talk to it? You use tone, you use gesture, you use commands. But the dog doesn't hear the words, the dog listens to the tone, the dog listens to your posture, right? So you talk to the back of your brain using that kind of language, not logic. And when you talk to it in that fashion, it just goes, yep, what do you want? And then you can feed it according to its mode of communication. I kid you not, 3 minutes.
That's incredible. Yep. Do you find it easy? I guess it's a relative term, but I mean, when you work with people that have little to no background in what we might call traditional martial arts, or you work with people that have a vast amount of experience. Is it almost harder for people with the more experience to reprogram the way that they think than it is the person you get from scratch?
It's about the same. Because what I do is I distress people. When I go into gangster mode, I distress people. I unnerve them. I kind of bypass their rational faculties. Right? You put them in that place of uncertainty. You engage that. So I would say the majority of the time, the bulk of the time, I can effectively get that lesson across. Maybe I'll need to repeat it. Usually I don't. Don't forget, though, contextually, this is designed for a close-range ambush. This is whether you are nailed, but there needs to be some level of, shall we say, awareness that something may occur, so you prime yourself. Or B, you have to have practiced it enough that if you are taken unawares, your brain recognizes where you're at, what's coming in, and responds automatically. And so you don't go into that you simply just, okay, I know this, move, right? And it then handles its business, hands over to you for processing. What do you see? What's going on? Okay, nope, back over. So it switches back and forth between your forebrain and the back of your brain. So no, I haven't really found any difficulty between absolute experts and total beginners. It's pretty much, I get the same results.
Wow. So this collaboration that you've been doing with Mark Denny, I know Mark kind of wanted to keep it a bit hush-hush when I talked to him about it a few months ago. I don't know if more has come up or what you're able or willing to share, but what's the general broad stroke of what you guys are working on?
It's an integration of what he calls the chupacabra, with the blending of some of my work in terms of the movement. So I'm expanding the repertoire of movement within the chupacabra, which is a structure designed for people with minimal time to learn, but it provides them with the, shall we say, the emotional arsenal to go into the fight. There's an obstacle, it's bigger than you, you're scared, you got to get through it. You don't have a choice. Either your safety's on the other side or your family's behind you, and you got to get through that. So it gives you a solid, and I mean a solid defensive structure. It gives you the ability to improvise, and it gives you the ability to, while maintaining a solid offensive structure to protect your head, protect your neck, protect your vitals, allows you to still attack, but also it allows you to hide and conceal. So the deceptive nature of what I teach, what I call part of my Tripwire syllabus, the deceptive nature, the African deceptive tools and the ability to switch angles and work at very weird angles. This is a blending of these two. And also how to maintain balance when being hit by someone much bigger rather than falling on your ass.
Well, I am very excited to attend one of these events when you guys finally start doing them. We'll have to, once you guys solidify some more stuff, share it with us. We'll post it. We'll help promote, any events you guys have coming up, because I want to go to one. So I have to assume that some people watching would want to go too. I mean, I don't think I'm that much of an anomaly. That seems incredibly interesting to me. When you dedicate your life to something like this, there has to be some type of something driving you to do it. What is it for you that, I mean, if you've made this such a big part of your life, what is it that drives you to do this?
I don't like to talk very much about this in my family background, but I grew up around a lot of violence. I saw a lot of violence very close to me within my family. And there were family members that I decided I must never be like this. And I decided that I needed to find a way to counter this, shall we say. I actually became a bodyguard. I was in close protection for some years. I worked freelance before moving to the Middle East. And so that became, shall we say, a professional pursuit in trying to I don't know, pay it forward, to not be, what I could have been, to not grow up the way I could have grown up, to try to just right some of the wrongs that I saw around me. I've seen a lot of violence, and I just wanted to. I don't want to sound overly idealistic, but does it make sense?
It absolutely does. I mean, we've all got stuff that's pushing us to go forward, because this is not. I mean, this is not necessarily. People wouldn't look at us and think, well, that's a totally normal thing to dedicate your life to. I mean, say for me, people ask me like, why are you doing that? You could do anything, and it's something. this feels like what you're meant to be doing, and anything else would almost feel a little bit disingenuous. Do we have any more questions? I see stuff popping up.
Not at the moment, just comments.
Okay, what do we got for comments? Read a couple off.
Let me see here. A lot of haze.
A lot of
Everybody's
haze.
saying hi.
Hey, hi everybody.
We had a post by Clive again. Evil will always find a way. Ban guns, ban knives. Someone will kill you with a spork. Lol, the time I spent in Africa taught me that people will do whatever they need to survive. In England now, it does feel like the martial arts are almost coming home to their origin. Normal people learning how to protect themselves. Unarmed skills, tactical pens, and you can only carry a torch really on the streets. And make sure it works so you can pretend it's for finding your way home from the pub.
Yeah. One thing to recognize is that you look at African culture, they escalate violence a lot faster than Western cultures do. So that's something that I know. I've heard about that in the UK. The gangs had to change their MOs because the gangs coming from Africa, moving into the hoods, they escalated to violence a lot faster. And that's something to really bear in mind. That this guy's going to go, instead of going from 1 to 10, he's going to go 1 to 10. Instead of counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's keep that in mind. Be ready to go. And this is something that I try to teach people how to. You've got to be able to switch it on and gain initiative very quickly.
And that's something that I personally have always struggled with because I'm 6'4", I'm a big guy, but I have a very kind temperament, which kind of works against me sometimes, where I was always so much bigger than everybody that your entire life you're told to take it easy and not be hype. As a kid you want to wrestle and all this stuff, but you got to be so careful. And so it gets programmed into you to give people every chance possible, just like, come on. And, there's been plenty of times where because I've been slow to, I don't know if anger is the right word, but, really trying to de-escalate for too long, it's caught me unaware. And then that was a learning experience. I had to, reassess my temperament. Is that something that, does this kind of fit into what you're teaching? I mean, what if people's temperament is just too passive? How do you get them past that?
You frighten them. I mean, that decision to defend yourself, to defend your family, the loved ones behind you, that has to be made long before you encounter your first violent offender who wants to hurt you or your family. You've got to make that decision. You have to choose to defend your boundaries, right? Very often, just the fact that you have come to that decision, that you've chosen. Look, I think you, as you've just said, when you decided to act, you were forced there. And you are only acting because you've literally been forced there. You have no other choice now. And very often the fact that you've made that decision, I've seen many times working professionally, all back home under different circumstances, but the fact that that look comes into my eyes, that tells people maybe you want to find someone else to pick on, because then suddenly they look like lunch to me. And you teach people, look, here's the thing. This is something also I wanted to. I know people who teach similar types of things, but the problem is they stay there. And when you stay in that mode, when you stay in that mindset, it becomes toxic. You don't step out of it. It's addictive, it is seductive, and it is incredibly destructive. What I do teach is also, but the fact that you're flipping that switch like this, like a machine gun firing bullets, when you go into that mode and you attack, it's there for a tenth of a second, you switch it off, you come back into awareness, take a look, switch back, tenth of a second, switch back. You never hold on to it, so you don't become that predator. You are also never going to go into tunnel vision. You're not going to murder someone because you just lost all control. It's simply because you don't allow that impulse. That impulse comes out for a tiny fraction of a second at a time. Gathers data, goes back, takes action, gathers data, goes back, takes action, but it never stays there. So it never overwhelm you. It's not going to make you into a super predator. That's one thing we definitely want to avoid. We want to do things that are appropriate, and if you are going to have to take someone out lethally, that must be A, because it's sanctioned, because it's your job, or because you literally had no choice and you're complying with the law, your morals, and so on.
See, that sounds like the way you lay it out, it seems so simple, but that adrenal state, once it takes hold of you, snapping in and out of that has to be a learned skill, because naturally you want to stay in it. When you finally commit to doing something, it's like on, and you're raging until you can calm down.
that is specifically what I teach. When we're talking ambush, it's not necessarily, it's actually this, I haven't yet found the way to make this apply, let's say, to a sparring. I've got a friend who says he can, right? He teaches, he's a very good fighter himself, but this is really designed for an ambush. Things are going balls to the wall any second. Things are going to get violent. So it's really designed for that. And there is where I've been able to make it such that you don't lose control.
That is incredible.
I know I'm making certain claims. I do understand that. I do teach this in my seminars, and as I said, I've got someone with the reputation of Mark Daney who backs me up here. He's obviously asked the same questions, and I have to prove it. And with the Dog Brothers, they don't just, the Dog Brothers are not exactly walk in the park. So yeah, I've had to prove this, and I do it, and I teach to people because I've seen people go that way, and I've seen what it does to people's lives, to communities, and honestly, this is something I've spent 18 years figuring out.
So people that are watching, definitely look up the Piper System. You said it's on Facebook, right? You have a Facebook page. It looks like you have a Twitter as well for the Piper System.
Yeah.
And then I put your personal Facebook information on there. I'm intrigued. That was a good enough elevator pitch that I will definitely be attending one of your events here soon. Is there any hope of you coming to the U.S. event soon, 2019 maybe?
I was meant to do 3 or 4 trips to the U.S. in the first quarter. I've had to put them on hold now. As I said, I've just moved to Poland. I am sorting out my visa issues, and unfortunately, till that's done, I can't leave. So I have to first finish that immigration process before I can plan. But yeah, I should be. Mark and I have some plans, and I've got some other seminar invitations to various cities. You're based in?
Utah. I was just going to say, we'd love to have you out here too. I mean, if you take a trip to the U.S. and you want to hit up a bunch of places while you're here, we would love to host you at our academy here in Utah.
Thank you. I'd love to come. I love the States. I have so many good friends out there, man.
Oh yeah. Well, and we're hungry for this type of stuff. I mean, culturally, we still have the firearm culture. Thank goodness that we can, because I mean, if we're gonna deal with something that's gonna happen anyway, let's have the most efficient tools to do it. I get both sides of the argument, but I am not an anti-gun person by any stretch. Part of that's being out west too. It's a very people are very conservative about their gun ownership. Do we have some other questions?
Yes, we do. We have one from Brian. Do you use NLP anchoring type exercises when training your students to access those states?
No, actually, I use non-intellectual means. I deliberately work to shut off their intellect and prime them. I wouldn't say emotionally, because that would be correct, but also wrong. It's a different kind of knowing, like you're working with a different part of the brain that functions in a different manner. So if you imagine you had a little, David Grossman calls it the puppy. Imagine you had a puppy. You can't use NLP on a puppy because it doesn't speak English. So you have to you have to communicate with it in the modality that it understands. So think, you've got 2 modalities. One, action beats reaction, right? We want to move fast, and that's your forebrain, right? You plan and you execute. I'm working from a modality of where reaction beats action. We want to consistently beat action. And to do that, we have to access that part of the brain that can see at 13 thousandths of a second and respond at that speed.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, the whole process, it's like, I've heard terms, I've heard, a lot of the quips, and I know what I've experienced, but to be able to articulate what I've felt is something that's incredibly helpful too, to hear things described in a way that you can consciously articulate it now, where it was just kind of this nebulous thing that you experienced in the past, and you try to make sense of it through your experiences and prepare for the next time that it happens. But to have it articulated in such a way, I can see how it would be able to be conveyed very quickly too, because especially anybody that's experienced physical violence knows what you're talking about on a primal level.
We've all been there. We've all had it. It's triggered inside all of us at some point, but never consistently, right? But no one's also studied the black fighting culture the way that I have. So I've been able to extract this. I mean, it didn't happen overnight. This is more than 10, 15 years of work. I mean, it's been 18 or 19 years now since I've been doing this. And it took me like 15 years just to get to the first point, like, hey, there's something there,
Yeah. Well, as we kind of wrap this up here, is there anything are there any topics that you wanted to get to that we didn't cover? Any products you want to push, or events, or anything coming up?
No, at the moment, until I get my visa in Europe, I am planning. I have planned several seminars in Europe. I have planned seminars for the States. I'll get those out on my Facebook page. Piper System, Tripwire System, and I did recently release a video series, and you can find it at search for my name, Lloyd De Jongh, and you can search for. Oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of the publisher.
If you send me the info afterwards, we'll put it on the video in the descriptions link so people can check that out.
Yeah.
Do we have? I see some more stuff popping up. I don't want to cut people off. Do we have any more questions we need to get to?
We got one more.
One more. Let's do it.
This is from, I think I'm pronouncing it right, Laur. Hi, Lloyd. I understand well that you incorporate also pressure tests, exercises in what you teach. By the way, how is the legislation in Poland regarding weapons? What is your EDC there?
I can carry all of these on me in Poland.
Well, see, I need to move to Poland.
Poland doesn't mess
Wrong
around
country.
anymore.
I was hanging out with some of my friends. The guy had like 3 knives in one pocket, 3 folders in one pocket. He had a dagger in his back pocket and another fold in it. He's like 5 knives on him. He was like, yeah, it's legal.
What's the stance on firearms in Poland?
They're pretty rare, actually. Look, it's the safest country in Europe. Probably the safest country in the world. Hell, I don't know. It is so peachy here, man.
Why do you think that is? Is it a cultural thing? I mean, how has Poland avoided all this trouble that's around it?
It's a homogenous country. It's 99% ethnic Poles. It's a very Christian country. It's a very, very people have a very strong faith. So they abide by those rules, and it's also a very educated country. You're talking education's free. I think 4-year education is free, so people have 2 degrees, PhDs, masters in this. Lots of people have 2 degrees, so these are educated people. They're busy building. Also, Poland comes through a lot of violence. I mean, you had the Nazis, World War II, then the Russians for 50 years, and before that they were invaded by, you name it. I think 40-something times they've been invaded. They just want to get on with their lives and build their country.
So how does that work with immigration then? I mean, are people just not trying to go to Poland, or do they make it? What type of things do you have to do to become a Polish citizen?
It was destroyed in World War II. I mean, literally destroyed. It was flattened in World War II. It was then a communist country for 49 years, and it is now booming. But prior to that, it was a poor country. So it's only just coming out of that perception, that negative perception of being a poor country. So now it is starting to boom. They're also very careful with their immigration, who they allow in and why. And I've been visiting it for many, many years. It's a great place. So I think they take great care as to not disrupt their society and to bring in people that are of value to the society. So yeah, it's a great place to be.
Well, Lloyd, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. And like I said, stay in touch, because seriously, I mean, I'd love to have you back on the show. If you have events, we'll promote them. Send me a link to, especially that video series that you were talking about, because I don't care what anybody else does, but I want to check it out.
School of Arms Media. Sorry, my bad. School of Arms Media. I spaced there for a second.
School of Arms Media.
Yeah, School of Arms Media. You'll find my series there.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. And stay tuned next week. We are having Ron Balicki on the show. And we thank you guys so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you.
Hello, my fellow martial arts nerds. If you enjoyed that podcast, then click subscribe on our YouTube channel, like and follow us on Facebook, and stay tuned for more awesome martial arts related content.